Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good to see so many people from so many places. I think we have a very international crowd today. We have people from India, people from Vietnam, Laos, people from Thailand, Russia, people from faraway places, St. Charles, St. Louis. We have people from right around Augusta, too. So, Chesterfield. Anyone from Chesterfield besides me? Okay. Taiwan, China, Hong Kong. So people from all over today. So I'm going to be giving a talk about consciousness. This is my fourth talk on consciousness. So not important that you didn't come to the first three talks. I'm still trying to make sense. So maybe today will be a little clearer. So we have a number of people who rotate here and give talks. Master, who's not here today, and we have 4 senior teachers and people who are in training to give talks here. And so we rotate. Usually now I give a talk every maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes more often, depending upon filling in for people. So usually, even though there's a topic for us, we don't necessarily coordinate our talks with each other. We don't get together necessarily and say, okay, I'm talking on this and this is how it can be connected. So whenever you come, it's kind of random. And it may seem that way, but today actually my talk is follow-up, just by coincidence, with the talk that Xiankuan Don gave last week on the Upanishad Sutta. So my talk will be very connected to that. But before I give that talk, we've also been having a number of retreats here recently on the theme that's connecting the retreats is the teachings of the great Chan Master, Venerable Huineng, who lived in the 7th century. And one of the things that he spoke about in great detail is how it was important for people to find the teachings of the Buddha in the world, not to just separate and just find the truth of the teachings of the Buddha in meditation, but also to find it in the world. So I have a few stories about finding the teachings in the world, and I'm going to start off with a little story about how when I was a small child, I had a very strong desire to have a Mickey Mouse watch. And I thought that if I could get a Mickey Mouse watch, I would be very happy. My father, who was more knowledgeable and had more experience in the world, said to me, if I get a Mickey Mouse watch, I will be no more happy than I was without it. Of course, I knew he was wrong. Eventually, I think I got the Mickey Mouse watch, and of course, it broke. So then I was sad. So one would think that I would learn from this experience, but no. Not so long ago, I found myself in a store that sold James Bond watches. Now I've graduated. The Mickey Mouse watch becomes the James Bond watch. And I remember that a few years ago I had looked at a James Bond watch, and it actually was the watch that James Bond wore in the movie. And it had an inscription in the back that this was an authentic James Bond watch, and I knew that it wasn't really true because James Bond would never have his name on the back of the watch. But now I've found that there is a new watch, James Bond watch, doesn't have the inscription on the back, and I thought, oh, this will make me very happy. So I went home to my wife and I told her about this watch, and I said, oh, you can give it to Jay, younger son, when I'm dead and gone. This is a great idea. He likes James Bond. My wife says, this is foolish. You will not be any more happy than you are now without it. Plus, Jay doesn't wear a watch. He has a phone. So I'm disappointed. I want the watch. Not going to have the watch. Then, a few weeks later, I'm still thinking about the watch, of course. Craving has arisen in my mind. Now I'm clinging to this. Everywhere I go, I'm wondering if people are wearing James Bond watches and I don't have one. So, Caddy, we had given the talk last week. She had come back from Hong Kong, and usually when she comes back from Hong Kong, she brings presents for her friends, and fortunately I counted among those friends, and she brings usually a t-shirt, but this time, in addition to a t-shirt, she brings a little bracelet. I'm wearing it today. It has some Tibetan word on it that has to do with compassion. And I thought, this is a very unusual gift, and I put it on, and immediately when I put it on, it feels exactly like the James Bond watch. Oh boy, I can't wait to put it on. The next morning, I go to my office, and I start. Of course, when I'm working at my office, I have a laptop that I can put on my lap, and I can type notes while I'm working, and I go to type the notes, and suddenly the bracelet is hitting the computer all the time. I realize this is not going to work. And then I realized if I had the James Bond watch, it would have the same impact. So it cured me of my desire for the James Bond watch. So sometimes you don't know where your next great teacher will come from, where your next great teachings will come from. So I want to thank Caddy so much for the bracelet, that it doesn't work, it doesn't tell time, but it keeps me from wanting the James Bond watch. She didn't realize that when she gave it to me. So, consciousness. Consciousness is what we call being sentient. Sentient means that we're capable of having thought. Capable of having thought means that we can take information from our senses and we can process that information, even if we don't get sense data, from our body, from our sight, smell, taste, touch. The mind will create its own set of imaginary sensations, desires. This is what we call being sentient. Now we know that human beings are sentient. We pretty much know animals have some degree of sentience. They're capable of some level of thought. Not so much language, but thought. We're not so sure about plants. They have some feelings, but we don't think that they can think. Certainly rocks, not capable, as we know it, of sentience. There may be other beings, other places that we may not see, that may have some sentience, we don't know. But we know that our own consciousness is very important, because that's the spark that makes us awake. That's what distinguishes paying attention from not paying attention. It has to do with our very core of our being in some ways. So to understand this consciousness is quite important. Now, in the West, we identify our consciousness in a particular way. And that consciousness in the West studies consciousness from the point of view of our thinking, oftentimes related to what we want, what we desire. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and during that time the idea is you want to raise your consciousness. But there was no real organization to raising your consciousness. There was no real understanding of a goal or a purpose of why you would want to do it, other than to feel better. But somehow or other, many of those efforts to try to raise our consciousness were very temporal, didn't last very long, and weren't very successful in really making a change in who we are and our happiness. So when we study Western things from a Western point of view, talking about consciousness or unconsciousness or subconsciousness, very limited in terms of its understanding of what the mind is really doing. In a teaching that I've been discussing called the Mahanidana Sutta, this is the Great Links Discourse, talks about the experience that the Buddha had just as he was becoming enlightened, as he was liberated from suffering. The Buddha had this awareness of how causes and conditions were linked together. And they were linked in a 12-step way. And in this particular sutta called about the 12 links, it discusses the 12 links, but it pauses and goes into greater detail about craving. Talks about the 10 sub-stages of craving, and that was in my first talk of the 3 that I've given previously. And then it also pauses to talk about consciousness. Craving is the 8th link, and consciousness the 3rd link. Goes in reverse order in this particular Mahanidana Sutta. And so in my previous talks I discussed about this method that the consciousness tries to create a self, and what the troubles are with the mind creating a self, and what happens when the mind doesn't create a self, how does that happen, and what goes on as a result of that. And then from that, how there emerges different realms of our awareness, which leads to my topic today, the last part of the Mahanidana Sutta, which has to do with what's called the 8 emancipations. So if you don't understand the other stuff, not so important. So these 8 emancipations, there's a sheet that I've given you, and there's a dark side and a light side, and on the light side you'll see the 8 emancipations, I think, on the right-hand side. These 8 emancipations are the way in which our consciousness becomes liberated from suffering. And you'll notice that this does not take place in what we would normally consider what we usually live in, what's called the desire realm. The desire realm is that realm of craving. I want the James Bond watch. I don't have it, and I will be happier if I get it. Then I get it, then I realize, oh, it really didn't change my happiness at all. And then eventually it will break, or I'll lose it, then more trouble. So in the first of these stages, a person realizes this and recognizes that the desire realm is not where I'm going to find true happiness. It's not going to happen there. So I need to be able to find some other way in being able to understand the world. So I realize that because I am made of form, I'm going to see forms. And that's all that it is. They're just forms. The forms are there, but just because I have them or think that I have them, this is not going to lead to greater happiness. It's just a form. It's just a thing. Just a substance that can be used. It's neither good nor bad. It's just how I use it. When a person realizes this, this is a great emancipation. You get to leave the desire realm. Now this is not so easy to do because much of the world is set up in such a way that it continually bombards us with the notion that getting stuff is going to make us happy. We're talking about this downstairs. And once we realize that getting stuff is not going to make us happy, we may get the stuff and it may help us in a particular point in time, but it is by nature impermanent. It's not going to be perfect, and it's not about me possessing it or owning it. Once we realize this, we have this sense of emancipation. I'm going to give a little story. I got permission from one of our members to be able to tell this story. Many of you know, if you come regularly, you know Sammy. Sammy's from Thailand. Sammy struggles with some serious health issues. And I hadn't seen her for a while, and last week I was talking with her and she says, "Oh, I've been in the hospital 3 times in the last month." She said, "But I have some medicine that makes me fine." She said, "Would you like some of my medicine?" I said, "Oh no, I'm taught not to take other people's medicine." She says, "This medicine you can take." I said, "Oh, I'm not so sure about that. I'll have to check with my pharmacist." She said, "This is the medicine." She said, "This is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself." This is what the medicine, she said. "This is the medicine," she says. "I take this a lot. Every day. Sometimes, many times a day. You try it." Well, of course, for those who know, this is a teaching from the Buddha, from a particular sutta, a discourse called the Greater Exhortation, or encouragement to Rahula. Rahula was the son of the Buddha. They were walking together into town, carrying their robes, and it must have been a very warm day because they were carrying their robes. They weren't wearing the outer robe. They had their bowl. And Rahula was walking behind his father, the Blessed One, and the Blessed One, looking back at Rahula, addressed him. He said, "Rahula, any form whatsoever that is past, future, or present, internal or external, seen as it actually is with right discernment, is as this. This is not mine. This is not myself. This is not what I am. I'll repeat this. Every form is to be seen as it actually is with right discernment. As this is not mine, this is not myself, this is not what I am. And then Rahula, his son, said, just form, O Blessed One, just form, O well-gone one. Form, Rahula, and feelings, and perception, and mental formations, and consciousness. Right. Even my consciousness, then, not mine, not myself, not what I am. This is what the Buddha said. This is some strong medicine. I hope it doesn't have side effects. So in the 8 emancipations, we start with this. We just see the form as form. We don't take it as, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. So, as the emancipations continue, we go more deeply and more subtly into the practice. Now, when we're practicing mindfulness meditation, we're focusing on our breath, on our body, maybe on loving kindness and compassion. We're cultivating this awareness, the ability to be able to calm the mind, and then to have some special insight and awareness into the mind. As this develops deeper and deeper, this calm, abiding, and special insight, shamatha and vipassana, become joined with each other. And then, if we have the causes and conditions that allow us to practice more deeply in meditation, and also to be able to apply that to our learning in the world, then we may have the opportunity to let go of the desire realm. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the mindfulness of breath discourse, one of the 2 main teachings that the Buddha gave on the practice of meditation, as we call it, the practice itself is divided into 16 parts. Usually, when people are beginning, we just teach the first few parts, maybe the first 4 parts, for a person who's into regular practice. But if you look more deeply into the teachings, you can see that you can divide it, if you like, these 16 parts into 4 different stages. And the last of these stages are described as such. A person in their practice is able to experience impermanence, dispassion, cessation, and relinquishment. And it's through these 4 practices that allows the person to then let go of what we call the desire realm. Impermanence is the first way in which we shake ourselves awake to the desire realm not being where we want our consciousness to reside. We can't be emancipated in the desire realm. We only get more and more stuck in the desire realm. So we shake ourselves up with the notion of impermanence. Oh my, impermanence. Anything that I get, anything that I attain will only work for so long that it will break down, or I will lose it, or my body will leave this world and I won't be able to take it with me. Always impermanence. The second is then, okay, so I don't have to be passionate about the desire world. I can let go of my passion for the desire world. Certainly there may be things that I can utilize there. There are relationships that I can form. This is really Huineng talks about a lot of this, the person we were studying from the 6th century. In the world, we experience things, but we don't attach to them. We become dispassionate. We experience it, but we don't attach to it in that way. Even our closest relationships, we have deep caring, loving kindness, compassion. We have a deep sense of love for the person. We care about them, but we don't attach to it. And so on, even to ourselves. No attaching to that either. This allows us to have this sense of dispassion, which then leads to the cessation. Cessation is a word that's very confusing because when you think of cessation, you mean it's all over now. We're dead, gone, that's all. But cessation here doesn't mean the cessation of sentience. It just means that the sentience is not attached to the desire realm. This is where the cessation begins. And then from that we can relinquish, we can let go of all of the attachment that we have to the desire realm. And at the same time have a great feeling of loving kindness and compassion toward all of our experiences in the desire realm. So we don't separate ourselves, because if you separate yourself from it, you become averse. When you become averse, that's just another form of attachment. So now you're caught in the paradox. So this is the second of the great emancipations. Not perceiving a form internally, one sees forms externally. So we see, even though we know that this is hollow of anything that we can attach to, we see the forms externally, and we know how to relate to the forms externally without attaching to them, but still having loving kindness and compassion. Realizing that there's a lot that we can learn from our experiences. And then the next verse is a little tricky. One is intent only on the beautiful. This is the third emancipation. So this is a little bit tricky. I think that the rendition here is that we're talking about seeing the world and every experience as being very precious. Every moment we have is very precious because this moment will not come again. So we have the opportunity in any moment to learn something very important. And sometimes those teachings happen when we least expect it. It's just a question of where our sentience is tuned. Which leads me to my third of the 3 stories. So those of us who come to MABA regularly, we know Mama. Mama is the term that we have for a person who is very up in years. And this, our Mama here, she's in her late 80s. And over the last several years, she's from China, over the last several years, we've seen that she has had more and more difficulty having to walk with a cane now, lots of trouble with her body. This can happen. And she became more and more reclusive, not saying much, pain on her face, looking older, sad. But then, in the last few months, suddenly, she has a smile on her face. She's talking, she's moving around, same way, but still with a different feeling, I can tell. So the other day, I went to saw her downstairs in the dining area, and I said, "Mama, you're looking so well. You're looking beautiful. You look young." And she went like this, shooed me away. And then as I took a step back, she reached out, she grabbed my hand, and holding it, she said, "I've had a realization." I said, "Mama, what realization did you have?" She said, "Everybody is going to go through this. Everyone, as they get old, this is what happens. I know it. Everyone here, this person over here, this person over here, everyone will go through this." And then she pointed very poignantly to a little girl who was maybe 3 or 4 years old. She says, "She too will go through this. I know it." And she had a big smile on her face. Everyone will go through this. It's not so special what I'm going through. I don't feel the pain anymore the same way. Oh, I still feel it here or there. Not so much. This is relinquishment. This is seeing every moment as precious. So I want to thank you all for sharing these precious moments with me, allowing me to share with you these experiences. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from the altruistic joy, which is free from suffering. And may all beings dwell in the great equanimity, which is free from attachment, aversion,